Welcome to Death of Our Nation.
When I was a boy, I was fascinated with the world. I wondered why nations live and nations die. How do you kill a nation? Like Germany, it destroyed several other nations before being destroyed itself at the end of World War II. Even powerful empires perish. Where's the Roman Empire today? Or the Soviet Union? Nations can be destroyed from the outside by invasion and conquest. Or they implode from within by losing what makes them distinctive. I wonder if that could ever happen to America. When I first came to America as a 17-year-old, I knew I was coming to a special place. I didn't know much about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, any of that. I liked it here because I liked the people. I saw Americans as independent, hardworking, self-reliant. Americans are fiercely individualistic, but they're also fiercely attached to family and faith, to community, and to country. That's what the national anthem symbolizes, and the flag, that we're one country, and we're in this together. This is the America I know and love. But can it last? There are those in America who want to end the America we love. They believe America is defined by class oppression and white supremacy. They want, in Obama's phrase, to remake America. For this to happen, America as we know it must die. Who will stop them?
Billionaire Donald Trump is hitting the presidential campaign trail. Yep, he says he may run for president. Do it. Do it. Look at me. Do it.
And which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones, right now, Donald Trump.
You might be leading the Republican ticket next. I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on.
There's not going to be a President Donald Trump. That's not going to happen.
Donald Trump is not going to be president of the United States. Take it to the bank. I
Okay.
guarantee it. All right.
That's real Donald Trump. At least I will go down as a president.
Everyone had a good laugh at Trump, but not the American people.
20,000 people turned out last night at a football stadium in Mobile, Alabama to hear Republican frontrunner Donald Trump.
Man, I feel like a billionaire already. Show how many people come to these rallies. Turn them. Go ahead, turn them. Go ahead.
Trump and his voters at a bar.
We have a movement like they've never seen before.
So right now we have Hillary's about 75 or 80% favorite with different versions of the
Is it fun to be at a Trump rally? What happened? Is this the greatest?
He's just not going to win the general election in this mode. Not even close.
They believed Trump would fight for their America.
Such a nasty one. Fun.
So they stayed with him, and it drove the left nuts.
Donald Trump rally. No one thought we were going to be here. But we are.
Especially her.
Why aren't I 50 points ahead, you might ask?
Trump and his supporters were in it together.
I am your voice. I am with you. I will fight for you. And I will win for you. We will make America strong again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. God bless you and good night. I love you.
To be honest, I didn't think Trump would win. Hillary had total control of the Democratic machine.
Be reflected.
Her foot on Sanders' throat. A sycophantic Hollywood and media. How do you fight against all that?
From NBC News, Decision Night in America.
First and foremost, it's finally here.
He's here at the Javits Center, which is Hillary Clinton's election party site. There's a sense of building excitement. I mean, building excitement.
No, this is conservatives waking up and spilling the coffee and go, oh, right, our candidate was a moron.
We have our first projection that Donald Trump will win in Kentucky.
Okay, how Kentucky?
Small. It's small. But he's winning.
You need to go down a little bit, but still holding. So that's good news.
Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Trump, we project will win Texas. Anderson, this night is turning out to be a real nail biter.
That Donald Trump is leading Hillary Clinton among white women in Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia. Does that surprise you?
Kate, you should be nervous. It's not kidding around anymore.
Louisiana, Montana, Missouri, Ohio.
At the end of the day, you have your projection about 70% for Hillary Clinton. Where is it right now?
But the crowd now much more subdued here this evening.
Donald Trump will carry the state of Florida. All right, we have another major projection right now. Donald Trump will carry the state of North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
Can
we go back to Michigan, because I'm not sure I saw it correctly. Was that a...
Huffington Post, what happened to 98.4%?
CNN now projects that Donald Trump will carry the state of Wisconsin. He's cracked the so-called blue wall.
You pathetic losers! Some big news here, Megan. Huge news. Actually, the AP now projecting that Donald Trump has won the state of Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania was called for Donald Trump.
So, okay.
CNN projects Donald Trump wins the presidency.
I was happy he won. My film, Hillary's America, an expose of Hillary and the Democratic Party, played a role. But Trump made it happen. And when he won, that fact did not sit well with the left.
You're awake, by the way. You're not having a terrible, terrible dream. Also, you're not dead and you haven't gone to hell. This is your life now. This is our election now. This is us. This is our country. It's great.
Everybody is crying and so upset.
Scared, depressed, despair. America is crying tonight.
She deserves to be the first female president. That's what makes me so sad.
Sorry, I hate crying. I can't remember.
Get your abortions now.
People I'm speaking to think it's absolutely catastrophic.
Boastful, bullying, coarse, crude. That's the way they're going to see America. So,
Ugly American.
ugly America. Slavery to Nazism. We are not going to be okay.
Feels like the end of the world.
There are demonstrations in major American cities across the country tonight over the election of Donald Trump.
Again, the left turned to violence.
Is there a doomsday plan?
We're gonna go after him in every conceivable way. A Trump presidency is unthinkable and dangerous and damaging. So basically, anything we do to stop that is perfectly fine, whether it's ethical or not, whether it's legal or not. It doesn't matter.
The political left immediately set out to reverse the election results with a sequence of strategies.
Today, Jill Stein of the Green Party called for recounts in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
That recount actually increased Trump's lead.
Thank you. Thank you, darling.
There were countless stories of Trump losing the popular vote.
Donald Trump won fair and square. How did he win fair and square? Hillary had more votes.
Then they tried this.
Republican members of the Electoral College, this message is for you.
Maybe they could convince Trump electors not to vote for him.
I'm going to talk to an electoral college voter next who says it's gone as far as death threats.
The votes are 10 votes, Donald J. Trump.
Yes, shame on the American people for voting for Trump.
Shame on you.
Tens of millions of Americans are totally fine with a man who's driven almost purely by racism and sexism and Islamophobia.
I genuinely do not understand how America can be this disorganized or this hateful.
I have no respect for women who voted for Trump. Okay? I just think you're dumb. Okay? I think you're f***ing dumb.
How do you think people are going to vote if you talk to them that way? More than 50 House Democrats boycotted the inauguration of President Trump, although the left did show up to riot.
What anti-vibes? This is what the anti-Trump movement is. This total anarchy in the streets.
Preserve, protect, and defend. Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
The left couldn't keep him from being sworn in as President of the United States, so they turned to impeachment.
Next week, there will be a vote to impeach.
It's obviously it's no small matter when we're talking about impeachment of the President of the United States.
You could write it down in stone. He will not finish his first term.
The Democrats will take over, and they can launch impeachment in 2019 without a single Republican vote.
Robert Mueller's Russia probe will eventually reveal misdeeds that are impeachment worthy.
Everyone is colluding with Russia except Trump.
Here's Donald Trump. Donald.
Maybe maybe the sexual harassment stuff would finally stick. But we knew we weren't electing a choir boy.
There's a new report alleging that Lisa Bloom solicited funds to pay off women who would then accuse the president of sexual assault.
How about the 25th Amendment? Because, you know, Trump is
The
crazy.
amendment says the president can be removed if majority of the cabinet determines that he is unfit.
This is a dangerously, emotionally, and mentally unstable individual here.
All this may seem unprecedented, but we've been here before. In 1860, America elected the first Republican president. Then, too, Democrats viciously attacked him. They called him an extremist and an authoritarian. Some sought to break up the country rather than accept his election. Lincoln saved America for the first time. And now, by tragic necessity, Trump is in a similar situation. What will the Democrats try this time?
Look at this Hitler speech, and we've translated it for you. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to make Germany great again.
90% of what he says, I'm like, this guy gets it.
He's going to take our economy from here to here.
Yeah, he's definitely taking it to a higher level. I'd say his support is about up there, right around here.
Donald Trump is flirting with fascism American style.
There's a word for this, Ashley. It's fascism.
And they don't just call him a fascist.
Do you think President Trump is a racist?
I think he is a racist.
This was a white lash against a changing country.
The president is, quote, a white supremacist, and that his rise is, quote, a direct result of white supremacy.
There it is. Racism and fascism. And we've heard it before. These incendiary accusations have been used for a generation to shame and smear Republicans, conservatives, Christians, and patriots. Is voting for Trump like voting for Hitler? Did Trump win because of fascism and white supremacy? Did he revive the worst strains of America's history of racism? Wouldn't that justify the left in rejecting the results of the election? But if they're wrong, if America is good, aren't we morally obligated to defend her? The stakes could not be higher. We're talking about the fate of the greatest nation on earth. Who are the real fascists? Who are the real racists? We must learn the truth. For progressives today, fascism is on the right, a philosophy of nationalism and authoritarianism. They call Trump a fascist because he's a nationalist. But so was my countryman Gandhi. So was Mandela and Winston Churchill. Lincoln was a nationalist. Were these men fascists? We've had authoritarian leaders since the beginning of time, but few were fascists. Look, Trump gets flayed in the media every day. Real authoritarians would have shut that down. So authoritarianism and nationalism don't exhaust the meaning of fascism. To go deeper, I sat down with progressive historian Robert Paxton, former head of Columbia University's history department. Paxton is no fan of Donald Trump. We have a group in America today, Antifa, which fashions itself anti-fascist.
Yes.
It drives speakers off the campus. Outwardly, it seems like there is some resemblance to Mussolini's black shirts, and the mission appears the same. In other words, to enforce a kind of ideological conformity by roughing up your opposition. Do you see a parallel between Antifa and the fascists that they claim to be fighting?
I think there's some tactical overlap. As soon as you start wearing a uniform and beating people up, you're obviously in fascist territory.
Now, does fascism matter today?
Yes.
Some people have said we are living through a fascist moment or a fascist strain in American politics. Are you worried that that's true?
But now, the fascist label seems to me to overlook two very important differences. One is the fascist regimes did not want a free economy. They had a regulated economy, and they had what was called corporatism. And all of the business enterprises were required to participate in 5-year plans. They had the opposite of what's going on.
So the principles of the American founding, the separation of state and society, limited government, individual rights, property rights, free markets. Would you agree that this is what the fascists hated?
The fascists and a lot of other people believed that these things had failed, and they were determined to propose an alternative that would revive them.
Dateline, Rome, October 31st, 1922. Italy was a sitting duck for an ex-communist named Benito Mussolini. The lantern-jawed founder of fascism took advantage of the political unrest in Italy after World War I. Mussolini directed a march on Rome. The next step was complete dictatorial control, a step which the Italian black shirt leader took without a second.
When Mussolini started out, he was a Marxist, he was a socialist, he was the editor of the socialist newspaper.
Yes.
He had a long background in socialist politics, right?
Exactly.
Mussolini allied himself with an intellectual, Giovanni Gentile.
Yes.
Gentile famously said, everything in the state and nothing outside the state, which Mussolini himself later repeated. How would you interpret this doctrine of sort of centralized state power?
Mussolini and the people who rallied to his cause, and this included some highly educated people like Giovanni Gentile, they were absolutely determined to make Italy strong, as it would come about by a central authority and direction. And I think the state was the instrument by which they thought that Italy would be generated.
And loyalty to the state is the vehicle to mobilize that inner soul. Mussolini was responding to what historians call the crisis of Marxism. Marx predicted that worker revolts would erupt in every industrialized country. But this never took place. Marx thought workers around the world would identify with each other on the basis of class. He rejected nationalism, saying a working man has no country. But Gentile, though himself a socialist, noticed that during World War I, working men fought for their own country. Mussolini and Gentile concluded that a new type of socialism was needed that would fuse nationalism and socialism. They called it fascism. And this is why socialists and progressives in America, many of whom had given up on orthodox Marxism, were drawn to fascism.
To the working out of a great national program would seek the primary front of the greater number.
Our new president at the time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was infatuated by Mussolini. He called him that admirable Italian gentleman. I am much interested and deeply impressed by what he has accomplished and by his evidenced honest purpose in restoring Italy. Mussolini reviewed FDR's book in an Italian magazine. His conclusion? FDR is one of us. He's a fascist. FDR dispatched members of his brain trust to Rome to study Italian fascism with a view to importing some of it here. Rexford Tugwell, one of FDR's closest advisors, after returning from Italy, observed, fascism is the cleanest, neatest, most efficient piece of social machinery I've ever seen. It makes me envious. The head of FDR's NRA, or National Recovery Act, Hugh Johnson, spoke of the shining example of Mussolini. He carried fascist literature in his pocket, and he called for the end of free market capitalism in America. He empowered industrial committees in every industry to set wages and prices and report to the federal government. Clearly, FDR recognized fascism was on the left. He saw it as more progressive than the New Deal. Mussolini was clearly a man of the left. But what about the ultimate fascist of them all, Adolf Hitler? Was he a man of the left? To figure this out, we must go to Europe. Hitler, like Mussolini, was a veteran of World War I. His politics were formed here in Schwabing in the atmosphere of bohemianism and sectarian socialism. The communist Lenin lived here in exile. Hitler and Lenin both frequented the same pub. Lenin famously didn't pay his bar tab. Imagine Lenin sitting here arguing with friends on how to save communism. Lenin lived just a block up the street. Hitler lived a block over. Hitler changed the name of the German Workers' Party to the National Socialist German Workers' Party. The very term Nazi is a compression of two words, National and Sozialista. Check out the official Nazi platform. State-controlled healthcare, profit sharing for workers and large corporations, moneylenders and profiteers punished by debt, state control of education, state control of media and the press, state control of banks and industries, seizure of land without compensation, state control of religious expression. This reads like something jointly written by Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Read the Nazi platform at the Democratic National Convention, and most likely it would provoke thunderous applause. Like Mussolini and Lenin, Hitler was anti-big business, anti-bourgeois, and anti-capitalist. But unlike Mussolini and Lenin, Hitler was also a racist. His racism, too, was rooted in his hatred of capitalism and business. He called the Jews greedy bankers. Hitler set out to destroy the Jews, confiscate their wealth, and redistribute it through Nazi, socialist, and welfare state programs. Another group Hitler hated were the communists. Not because they were socialists, but because they took their orders from Moscow. His thuggery started right here at Schellingstrasse 50, Hitler's Nazi headquarters.
Wir müssen den Kommunisten 10-mal so stark zurückschlagen!
Hitler saw the communists as traitors to Germany.
Nach Kommunisten! Wir als Factories Universities! Deutsche Kriegspartei!
He was a National Socialist, and they were International Socialists. He patterned his brown shirts both on Mussolini's black shirts and on the Ku Klux Klan. The Nazi brown shirts and the Klans were both about the same size, 2 to 3 million members. Both groups targeted a vulnerable minority. In the case of the brown shirts, Jews. In the case of the KKK, blacks. And both groups were extensions of a political party. In the case of the brown shirts, the Nazi Party. In the case of the Klan, the Democratic Party. In November of 1923, Hitler and his brown shirts took over the Burger Braukeller, a popular Munich beer hall.
Die nationale Revolution ist ausgebrochen!
Träde beginnt heute Nacht die deutsche Revolution. Aber wenn wir bei Morgendämmerung aufstehen.
The following day, Hitler and 2,000 party members marched on Munich to seize control. They were met by police. Hitler was arrested and sent to Landsberg prison, a formative period in his life. Here, Hitler dictated Mein Kampf to his fellow prisoner, Rudolf Hess.
Der Nationalsozialismus ist der Entschluss, einen neuen Menschen zu erschaffen. Dort wird kein Wille mehr existieren, keine Königreiche, in denen das Individuum sich selbst beherren wird. Die Zeit des Glücks als private Angelegenheit ist vorbei.
See how remote all of this is from the principles of Abraham Lincoln and the American founding? Hitler, however, had a much greater affinity for progressives and Democrats.
Weil der Lüge sagen und oft genug wird man es glauben.
It was here Hitler got a big idea from the Democratic Party, one that would shape his murderous campaigns. According to Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer John Toland, Hitler often praised the extermination of the Red Savages who could not be tamed by captivity. Hitler admired how Jacksonian Democrats gunned down the millions of Redskins to a few 100,000 and now keep the modest remnant under observation in a cage. His idea was to do to the Poles, the Slavs, the Eastern Europeans, and the Russians precisely what the Jacksonian Democrats did to the Indians. Hitler came to power in 1933. On the other side of the Atlantic, another charismatic leader, FDR, was elected. The two men recognized each other as fellow progressives. Here's what the Nazi newspaper, Völkischer Beobachter, said of the FDR administration. We too, as German National Socialists, are looking toward America. The Nazi paper congratulated FDR for replacing the uninhibited frenzy of market speculation with the adoption of National Socialist strains of thought. Of FDR's New Deal, the Völkischer Beobachter said, "We fear only the possibility that it might fail." Hitler quickly consolidated his power. He executed leaders of the brown shirts who had challenged his authority. This was the famous Night of the Long Knives. Some progressives try to portray Hitler as a right-winger by insisting he was anti-gay. But Hitler knew that the brown shirt leader, Ernst Röhm, was a notorious homosexual, as were many other brown shirts. When Hitler showed out to arrest Röhm, he encountered a remarkable scene. Röhm publicly suggested that he, not Hitler, was the true leader of the Nazi Party. When Heinrich Himmler urged Hitler to purge the gay brown shirts out of the Nazi movement, Hitler refused. Hitler said he didn't care what the brown shirts did in private, as long as they were good fighters. Hitler was no social conservative. Earlier we saw what Hitler learned from the Democrats, but was there anything he learned from American progressives? Investigative journalist Edwin Black, the son of Holocaust survivors, is the author of The War Against the Weak.
Now, you have written that eugenics in America, and this is true in other parts of Europe as well, was a progressive cause. Progressive in what sense?
Progressive in every sense. This was not done by people who thought that they were race haters. This was done by the do-gooders, the liberals, the people who wanted to improve society. Margaret Sanger, a progressive who wanted to help humanity, and her approach to doing that was to wipe away the existence of 2/3 of all people.
You mean 2/3 of the entire American population?
Yes, of course.
And she actually explicitly said this?
Of course. She wanted to get rid of human needs. She wrote about this extensively. At one point, Hitler wrote mail to one of her colleagues on her board and said, your writings are my Bible.
Now, this is Madison Grant, the head of the New York Zoological Society. Tell me about the meeting between Madison Grant and Whitney, another prominent eugenicist.
Madison Grant is discussing his fan mail from Adolf Hitler, and Whitney has an identical letter just like it. And so they both have letters in which Hitler thanks them. All these eugenicists saying, we have had a dramatic impact on Germany.
And you quote an American progressive eugenicist basically saying, hey, whoa, we've got to pick it up. The Nazis are beating us at our own game.
That's right. While we were pussyfooting around, the Nazis were beating us at our own game.
Why is it the case today, if I open a Planned Parenthood brochure, I get a completely different picture of Margaret Sanger than anything that you've described?
What's going on is the reshaping and the falsifying of history. The Nazis also invented history. There's a role for people like me and a role for people like you. We spend our lives trying to authenticate the real history.
We've learned how Hitler got his murderous conquest scheme from the Jacksonian Democrats. We've also learned how he got eugenic schemes from left-wing progressives. But what does Nazi racism owe to the Democratic Party? I went to see the historian and sociologist Stefan Kuhl, who has developed an international reputation for books like The Nazi Connection. I met with him in Munich.
What was the essence of the Nuremberg laws? These are the laws of 1935. What did they seek to do?
They actually gave the first definition of what is a Jew. It was not very easy for the Nazis to define what is a Jew.
Meine Herren, wir sind hier, um Gesetze zu schaffen, die es uns Deutsch ermöglichen, das jüdische Problem zu lösen.
Für solche Gesetze gibt es keine Präzedenzfälle. Weder in Deutschland noch in irgendeiner anderen industrialisierten Nation. Wie können wir das Gesetz nutzen, um die Bürger um ihre Rechte zu bringen?
Wir haben einen Präzedenzfall. Das ist unser Plan. Subjekte ohne Bürgerrechte.
Bürger zweiter Klasse.
Warum die Juden absondern? Das Gesetz kann einfach alle in die Schere bringen. Wenn wir spezifische Bezüge auf die Juden vermeiden, hilft es uns, internationale Unterstützung zu bekommen.
Unsinn! Die Amerikaner separieren die Afrikaner ganz eindeutig. So können wir die Juden separieren.
Und wer ist dann ein Jude? Eine Person mit jüdischem Vater, aber deutsche Mutter? Macht das einen Juden?
Wie identifizieren die Amerikaner einen Mann?
Die Eintropfenden. Jede erkennbare Spur schwarzer Abstammung heißt, dass man als Schwarze
Menschen begreifen. Auch wenn niemand weiß aussieht und sich wie ein Weißer benimmt, kann er immer noch als Schwarzer gesehen werden.
Die Eintropfenregel ist wohl zu streng. Wir können diese Blutzählung auf 3 jüdische Großeltern beschränken.
The Nazi Nuremberg laws were directly modeled on the segregation laws of the Democratic Party. Every segregation law in the American South was passed by a Democratic legislature, signed by a Democratic governor, and enforced by Democratic officials. As for the Democratic one-drop rule, incredibly, the Nazis found it too racist, even for them. As is well known, the Nazis also hated freedom of speech. The Nazi concept was called Gleichschaltung, which means bringing all the cultural institutions in line with Nazi ideology. This was the significance of the Heil Hitler salute and the draping of swastika flags off balconies. These things signaled humble conformity to Nazi doctrine. And what happened to dissident views of the German campus?
Die Elitentheorie schlägt vor, dass eine kleine Minderheit von politischen und ökonomischen Experten die meiste Kraft besitzt. Nicht demokratisch gewählte Führungskräfte. Jüdische Propaganda! Raus hier! Das ist mein Klassenzimmer! Was keine Rechte! Dieses Klassenzimmer gehört mir! Du kannst nicht mehr frei sagen, was du meinst.
Movements to crush dissent can quickly escalate from episodic violence to mass murder. Hitler's Night of the Broken Glass was justified as a lawful confiscation of firearms. This made Jews defenseless against Nazi assault. Then Hitler could carry out his goal to burn Jewish businesses, destroy synagogues, and eliminate Jews as a competitive threat in the German economy. Hitler didn't just target synagogues, he also targeted Christian churches. Many people don't know this because they've bought the progressive line that Hitler was a Christian. When coming to power, Hitler knew he needed Christian support, and so he feigned public belief in Christianity. But privately, in a series of recordings, Hitler railed against Christianity as a destructive institution, contrary to science, and the natural law of survival of the fittest. Once in office, Hitler persecuted Christians. His ultimate aim? The total destruction of Christianity in Germany. As a progressive, Hitler despised religious liberty. Nazism was his religion. With Germany the high altar, and Hitler himself the new Messiah. Hitler was no Christian. American progressives cheered Hitler's rise to power. They saw fascism, with its social control and its glorification of the centralized state, as a model for the future. With total control of the people in place, Hitler could now implement his master plan. In 1939, he invaded Poland. Within 2 years, he and Mussolini controlled continental Europe. Japan was at war with China. Fascism was on the march across the world.